Well, hey there, and welcome to video number 7 in my 90-day challenge called Girl, Just Turn the Camera On. So, I'm Keisha, and I am back with another video. So, if you haven't seen any of my intro videos or any of the other videos in this series, please take the time to go back and take a peek. I think you'll find a gem or two here or there. So, tonight I want to talk about the Great Divorce. So, Oprah recently, well, maybe a couple months ago, did a podcast about the Great Divorce. And what is the Great Divorce, you may ask? It is divorces that are now trending, actually, of couples who have been married for a substantial periods of time, like 20 plus years. And the reasoning and the rationale, that whole discussion was very interesting. But last night, my husband and I had the opportunity to join two other couples who are friends of ours for dinner. And we had not spent any time with these couples in a substantial number of years. We have never just had an opportunity to sit down, relax, and just chat. And so I ran into one of the wives at a store, and she was so excited to see us. Actually, it wasn't a store now. I remember it was Father's Day, and it was at a restaurant. And there we decided we really, really need to get together. And then the other couple is mutual friends. So we were able to actually make it work, right? And to actually sit down and have a really great dinner at a Brazilian steakhouse. Now, I was looking forward to this gathering because I knew there would be some great dialogue. I think altogether, it was about 75 years of marriage at the table. My husband and I have been married for 23 years. One of the other couples, 22. They'll be 23 years in November, I believe. And then the final couple, they have been married 28 years. They just had an anniversary. So all in all, about 75 years of marriage at the table. So we had such a robust conversation. And it's very interesting how this whole Great Divorce has started to trend. We did not specifically talk in the context of the Great Divorce, but we definitely hit a lot of the dynamics that were part of the conversation in that podcast that I watched on Oprah. So I want to have a little chat about it, or a little yap, I should say. So we talked about a number of things, and one couple, one of my friends, long-term time friend who was at the table, she was like, I have no energy to be anything less than transparent, which I appreciated. And she and her husband, their banter between the two of them is absolutely hilarious to me. But I love that they can have communication and dialogue without getting hyper emotional. I think is probably the best way I would describe it. And so it was still very productive, and it lent itself to the overall conversation, which I thought was really, really good. So some of the key points that we talked about was one was the man being the provider. Now, all of us are Christian couples, and two of the couples spent many years at the same church, and then my husband and I spent many years at a different church. However, overall, the overarching theme in both churches really was about the husband being the provider. And as I, scroll on social media and I hear the perspectives of these millennials and Generation Zers, is really, really interesting to me how they process some of the things that I guess they saw their parents go through. But regarding provisions, our generation was taught that the man is the provider. And now I think it's more cosmopolitan to understand and believe that the woman could be the breadwinner and that the man really provides a lot more than just money. Now, money, of course, is what makes the world go round, and we need it. But the lens of both of you being partners and co-sharing in that responsibility of provisions is not, foreign. And for the ladies at the table, all three of us, which is how we established our friendship many years ago, were stay at home moms. And I stayed at home for 7 years. And the other two, one I think is still at home, and her children are now soon to be leaving the nest. Um, and then another one stayed at home, I think, for about 10 years. But in any case, I think we all, even though we definitely kind of beat the horse about that whole topic, the man being the provider and who's the breadwinner, and different examples of situations that we're aware of, at the end of the day, it was a really robust conversation. And I like to allow people to land where they think it is best for them and their situation. Obviously, as a Christian couple, we lead with our understandings of the Bible. And at the same time, it can also be true that everyone does not fit per se that mold. What if a husband loses his job, can't replace that job and that level of income for a year or two? What do you do? Is it okay for the wife to go to work? All of these things can strain a marriage, and there can be resentment around that, and so many more emotions. So that was one part of our conversation that was really interesting. Another part of our conversation was about religion and how each couple has evolved in their churches. That was very interesting. I think my husband and I both are kind of at a point where we just have a mutual respect for each other's spiritual growth. Another couple, it was important to the wife to submit to whatever the husband wanted for their marriage. And she wasn't always happy with the choice of congregations, but she submitted to whatever his desire was. So those kind of things can really shape your marriage and really help you to establish the institution that you are a part of. However, every couple is different, and I don't think it's fair to judge another couple's where they are through your lens of your marriage, because every marriage is very, very, very unique. I do think it was very productive, though, for us to meet and have, this conversation, just reflective, pretty general about marriage, and how we and our experience has been over the years. I think every couple was very transparent. I remember when a few years ago, I know in our church there were some couples who um, did not make it. They divorced after their children left the nest. And now that it's this trend of gray divorce is very interesting to me. And so one of the wives asked last night, well, why do you think that is? What's different now than, maybe a more traditional marriage 20, 30 years ago? And two of us said, we're in a season now when women believe we have more options, and that's very true. So we know that back in the 50s and 60s, even I think it wasn't until the early 70s, a woman could not even get a bank account. She couldn't even get a credit card. Oh, I was trying to see what was in my hair. It's the polka dots. She couldn't even get a credit card. So a lot of women stayed in really, really bad marriages because they had several children and they didn't have any financial way to take care of themselves. But now people in general have options. I think people are very mindful of their options. People stay married. And before I jumped on, I thought about that Tyler Perry movie, Why Did I Get Married? And my question is, why do I stay married? And I saw something on socials the other day, and the girl described marriages. She said the older marriages between the boomers and the Gen Xers, even, there's been a thicker kind of love, but the younger generations have a thinner kind of love. And I thought that was very poignant metaphor, because if you have a thicker kind of love, you can endure a little bit more. Whereas this thinner kind of love is very fragile, and anything that happens, you give up on the relationship. And, everything is subjective. No two marriages are alike, and I don't think it's fair to really judge um, when somebody decides to leave their marriage or not, or if a marriage doesn't work for whatever reason. At the end of the day, everybody, there's only two people in that marriage, and so um, those two people have individual free will, and they can make whatever decisions they um, think, because everybody has free will, right? We know as Christians and as believers, God hates divorce and all of the things, and that it's a covenant union and it should last until death do you part. And we also know that that doesn't always happen. And so that's just the reality of it. But it is very interesting now that there's this trend that couples have, I don't know if they just totally stayed together for the children or what, but after 20 years or 30 years of marriage, they're opting out. And I think a lot are finding that the grass is not always greener. And at the end of the day, I've always said marriage really is about endurance, it's about forgiveness, and it's about joy. I don't feel like marriage should compromise your joy. I really believe that whatever your situation is, it should be something that you work together for the best possible outcome. I think people are naturally selfish. People are naturally self-centered, but marriage is really, in my belief, about stretching and growing the other person. And that's why opposites attract. I was telling someone today, if you did find someone who was just like you, they would drive you crazy. It's something about I really almost think it's like physics or something, chemistry, where, the fact that you are opposites, there are things that hold you together. Now, in my marriage, we really came together on two really core beliefs, and that was family values and spirituality. That was, both things are very important to us, and we really built our marriage and our family based on those things. I do think you have to have core beliefs, but you can be totally different in personalities and still develop a really good marriage. Do you love the person? Do you really care about them? Do you want the best outcome for them? Are you willing to be sacrificial? Because love is truly sacrificial. Are you able to forgive? And we obviously know that there's some things that you may want to walk away from in a marriage that were not your fault, total disrespect, cheating, all of those things. That's your option, right? At the end of the day, you get to choose. But it's very interesting, just the dynamics of marriage, and especially those who have that thick kind of love and who have endured some things. It would be very interesting to really have a broader conversation about why do you stay married. It's not about just getting married, but there takes a lot of work, and a lot of couples, I don't think, want to do the work that it takes to stay married. But I was really joyful last night in catching up with our friends and seeing that, we've all been committed to staying married. There was one last little thing I want to share, and that is the question that I'm going to ask you to maybe answer in the comments if you are married, and that is, if your spouse were to pass or something, would you get married again? And some of our answers were very interesting, and I'm actually not going to share because I'm ready to hear your comments, and I may do a follow-up video to this. But the question again is, would you get married again? Would you get married again if you had a successful marriage or a long sustaining marriage and that ended for whatever reason? Would you get married again? So that's our little chat, our little yap for today. I found it interesting. I hope you do too, especially if you're married and especially if you have a long marriage, maybe 20 years or more. What are your thoughts about marriage, and would you have changed anything? Would you do anything differently? Are you exuberantly happy about where you are in your marriage, or are you at the end of your rope, just barely able to hold on? I'd really like to get your comments. All right, guys, until the next video, please like this video. Please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bells. We will be working on this channel a little bit, make it more refined. I keep mentioning that at the end of every video because that is coming. This was never intended to start perfect, and I've mentioned that too, because if it had to be perfect, it probably would never have started. But it will, we will make some tweaks, changes, start to edit a little bit more. But for now, this is what we're doing. All right, until the next video, take care.